Neighbors told him to leave the dying cat alone. Days later, the police showed up at his door. The rusty swing set creaked mournfully in the light breeze, a lonely sentinel in the overgrown backyard. It had been years since children's laughter had echoed through the old oak tree, years since the house had felt like a home. Now it stood silent and forlorn, a testament to the passage of time and the changing tides of life. Into this quiet solitude stepped Thomas, a man on the cusp of retirement, seeking solace and tranquility after a bustling life in the city. He had purchased the old Victorian house on Elm Street with the hope of finding peace in its faded grandeur, a place to cultivate his roses and watch the sunset from the wraparound porch. He soon discovered, however, that small-town life was not without its own peculiar rhythms and undercurrents. His next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gertrude Higgins, a woman whose age seemed to rival that of the ancient oak in her backyard, was quick to initiate him into the neighborhood's intricate social tapestry. "You'll have to forgive the state of the place," she'd said, her voice a low, raspy whisper that seemed to carry the weight of countless years. "Old man Hemmings let things go after his wife passed. Couldn't bear to touch her things, you see. Heartbreaking, really." Thomas, ever the polite gentleman, had murmured his condolences, his gaze drifting towards the dilapidated house next door, its paint peeling and windows boarded up. A sense of melancholy settled over him, a premonition that his peaceful retirement might not be as tranquil as he had envisioned. His first encounter with the source of the neighborhood's hushed whispers came a few days later. He was tending to his rose bushes, the fragrant aroma filling the air, when a commotion from next door startled him. A ginger cat, thin and matted, lay listlessly on the porch steps, its labored breathing a stark contrast to the cheerful chirping of the birds overhead. Thomas, an animal lover at heart, felt a pang of sympathy for the creature. It was clearly in distress, its eyes glazed over with pain. He approached cautiously, calling out softly, "Here, kitty, kitty." The cat stirred slightly, its tail twitching feebly. Thomas knelt down, extending a hand to stroke its fur, but the cat flinched, a low growl rumbling in its throat. It was clear the animal was in no mood for human interaction. "Poor thing," Thomas murmured, his heart aching for the creature's suffering. He decided to leave it in peace, hoping it would find some comfort in the shade of the porch. As he turned to go, a voice, sharp and accusatory, pierced the air. "Leave it be, Mrs." Higgins stood at her fence, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of disapproval and suspicion. "That cat's been nothing but trouble," she declared, her voice carrying across the yards. "Best to let nature take its course." Thomas was taken aback by her harshness. "But it's suffering," he protested. "Surely we can do something to help it." Mrs. Higgins snorted. "Help it? That cat's half dead already. Just leave it be and let it die in peace." Thomas felt a surge of anger. He couldn't understand how anyone could be so indifferent to an animal's suffering. "I can't just stand by and watch it die," he said, his voice firm. "I'm going to call animal control." Mrs. Higgins's eyes narrowed. "You do that," she said, her voice laced with warning. "But don't say I didn't warn you. That cat's bad luck, and anyone who interferes will regret it." Thomas ignored her, his mind set on helping the poor creature. He went back inside and dialed the number for animal control, his heart heavy with the weight of the cat's suffering and the unsettling encounter with his neighbor. The arrival of the animal control officer caused quite a stir on Elm Street. Neighbors emerged from their houses, drawn by the flashing lights and the unfamiliar presence of an official vehicle. Whispers rippled through the crowd, curious eyes fixed on Thomas and the dilapidated house next door. The officer, a young woman with a kind face and gentle demeanor, carefully retrieved the ailing cat from the porch. She assured Thomas that they would do everything they could to help it, but she couldn't offer much hope. The cat was old and frail, its health clearly compromised. As the officer drove away, Thomas felt a mix of relief and apprehension. He had done the right thing, he knew, but Mrs. Higgins's ominous warning lingered in his mind. He couldn't shake off the feeling that he had stumbled into something unsettling. a hidden undercurrent beneath the placid surface of small-town life. The following days were filled with a strange tension. Neighbors who had previously greeted him with friendly smiles now averted their gaze, their greetings replaced with awkward silence. Mrs. Higgins, however, seemed to relish in his discomfort. She would often be found peering at him from her window, a smug smile playing on her lips. One evening, as Thomas sat on his porch, enjoying the cool twilight, a figure emerged from the shadows of the Hemmings house. It was a young man, tall and lanky, with a mop of unruly brown hair. He moved with a hesitant gait, his eyes darting nervously around the neighborhood. Thomas watched him with curiosity. He had never seen the young man before, and he wondered if he might be a relative of the late Mr. Hemmings. As the young man approached, Thomas offered a friendly greeting. "Good evening," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "Are you a friend of the Hemmings family?" The young man stopped abruptly, his eyes widening in surprise. He seemed startled by Thomas's presence, as if he had expected the house to be empty. No," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. I was just looking around." Thomas sensed the young man's unease. He seemed to be hiding something, his body language betraying his nervousness. "Well," Thomas said gently, "if you're looking for someone, I might be able to help. I'm Thomas, your new neighbor." The young man hesitated for a moment. Then, as if making a sudden decision, he stepped closer. "My name is Daniel," he said, his voice still shaky. I used to live here." Thomas was intrigued. "You lived in the Hemmings house?" he asked. "I thought it had been empty for years." Daniel nodded. "It has been," he said, "but I grew up here. My parents rented the house from Mr. Hemmings when I was a kid." A wave of understanding washed over Thomas. This was the child who had played on the rusty swing set, the source of the laughter that had once filled the air. He wondered what had brought Daniel back after all these years. "I'm sorry to hear about Mr. Hemmings," Thomas said, his voice filled with sympathy. "It must be hard to come back to your childhood home under these circumstances." Daniel's eyes filled with sadness. "It is," he said, his voice cracking. "I have a lot of good memories here. I just wanted to see it one more time." Thomas felt a pang of compassion for the young man. He could see the pain in his eyes, the weight of nostalgia and loss. He invited Daniel to sit on the porch with him, and they spent the next hour sharing stories and memories of the old house and its former occupants. As the night deepened, Daniel grew more relaxed, his initial nervousness fading away. He told Thomas about his childhood, his adventures in the backyard, his friendship with the old ginger cat that had roamed the neighborhood for years. "His name was Rusty," Daniel said, a fond smile spreading across his face. "He was my best friend when I was a kid. We used to play hide and seek in the garden, and he would always follow me to the bus stop." Thomas's heart sank. He realized that the cat he had found on the porch was none other than Rusty, Daniel's childhood companion. He gently broke the news to Daniel, explaining about the cat's condition and his call to animal control. Daniel's face crumpled. "Rusty?" he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "He's still alive?" Thomas nodded sadly. "He's very old and weak," he said. "I'm afraid he doesn't have much time left." Daniel was silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the ground. Then he looked up at Thomas, a plea in his eyes. "Can we go see him?" he asked. Thomas was touched by Daniel's request. He saw the deep bond between the young man and the aging cat, a connection that transcended time and circumstance. "Of course," he said. "I'll call the animal shelter first thing in the morning." Daniel's face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It means a lot to me." As the night wore on, Daniel shared more stories about his childhood, painting a vivid picture of life in the old house. He spoke of his parents, their struggles and triumphs, their love for the house and its quirky charm. He also spoke of Mr. Hemmings, his kindness and generosity, his deep affection for his wife and his profound grief after her passing. Thomas listened intently, piecing together the fragments of the past, gaining a deeper understanding of the house and its history. He learned that Daniel's family had moved away when he was a teenager, and that he had lost touch with Mr. Higgins over the years. He had only recently learned of the old man's death, and the news had stirred a deep longing to revisit his childhood home. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky, Daniel rose to leave. He thanked Thomas for his kindness and company, and promised to return the following day. Thomas watched him disappear into the morning mist, his heart filled with a newfound sense of connection to the house and its past. True to his word, Thomas called the animal shelter as soon as it opened. He explained the situation, emphasizing the importance of the visit for Daniel. The staff was understanding and agreed to arrange a special visit for them that afternoon. When Daniel arrived later that day, his face was etched with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Thomas reassured him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry," he said. "Rusty will be glad to see you." They drove to the shelter, their conversation filled with a quiet anticipation. Upon arrival, they were led to a small room where Rusty lay curled up on a blanket. The cat was weak and frail, his fur matted and his breathing shallow, but his eyes held a spark of recognition as Daniel approached. Daniel knelt beside the cat, his voice trembling as he spoke. "Rusty," he whispered. "It's me, Daniel." The cat stirred slightly, his tail giving a weak thump against the blanket. Daniel gently stroked his fur, tears welling up in his eyes. "I missed you, buddy," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry I left you." Rusty purred softly, his frail body pressing against Daniel's hand. The two old friends spent the next hour together, sharing a silent communion of love and remembrance. Thomas watched from a distance, his heart swelling with emotion. He knew he was witnessing a special moment, a reunion that transcended the boundaries of time and loss. As the sun began to set, they said their goodbyes to Rusty. Daniel was heartbroken, but also grateful for the chance to see his old friend one last time. He thanked Thomas profusely for his kindness, his gratitude shining in his eyes. On the drive back, a comfortable silence settled between them. Thomas sensed that Daniel had more to say, that there was a deeper story hidden beneath the surface. He waited patiently, giving the young man the space he needed to open up. Finally, as they turned onto Elm Street, Daniel spoke. "There's something you should know about the Higgins house," he said, his voice low and serious. "Something strange happened there many years ago." Thomas turned to him, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" he asked. Daniel hesitated, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and uncertainty. "It's a long story," he said, "but it involves Rusty, and a secret that has haunted me for years." Intrigued by Daniel's cryptic words, Thomas invited him back to his porch. As the twilight deepened, casting long shadows across the yard, Daniel began to unravel a tale that was both fascinating and disturbing. He spoke of a hidden room in the Higgins house, a small, windowless space tucked away in the attic. He had discovered it as a child, while exploring the house's many nooks and crannies. The room was dusty and filled with cobwebs, its only furniture a small wooden chair and a table. On the table lay a stack of old photographs and a leather-bound journal. Daniel, drawn by curiosity, had spent hours poring over the photographs and the journal entries. The photographs were mostly portraits of a young woman with striking blue eyes and a radiant smile. The journal entries, written in a faded, elegant script, chronicled the woman's life, her hopes and dreams, her love for her husband and her deep connection to the house. As Daniel delved deeper into the journal, he discovered a darker side to the story. The woman, whose name was Emily, had suffered from a mysterious illness, her health deteriorating rapidly over time. The journal entries became increasingly desperate, filled with fear and despair. Emily wrote of strange occurrences in the house, shadows moving in the periphery, whispers echoing in the empty hallways. One entry, in particular, sent chills down Daniel's spine. Emily described a night when she awoke to find a figure standing at the foot of her bed. The figure was tall and shrouded in darkness, its face obscured by shadows. Emily wrote of an overwhelming sense of dread, a feeling that something evil had entered the house. Daniel, his imagination running wild, began to fear the hidden room. He avoided the attic, his mind filled with images of the shadowy figure and Emily's chilling descriptions. He confided in Rusty, his feline companion, the only one who would listen to his fears. One day, while playing in the backyard, Daniel noticed Rusty behaving strangely. The cat was fixated on the old oak tree, his fur bristling and his eyes wide with fear. Daniel followed his gaze and saw a dark shape moving amongst the branches. The shape was humanoid, its limbs long and slender, its movements eerily fluid. Daniel, terrified, ran into the house, his heart pounding in his chest. He told his parents about the shadowy figure, but they dismissed his fears, attributing them to an overactive imagination. Daniel, however, knew what he had seen. He knew that something sinister lurked in the shadows of the old house. As the years passed, Daniel's fear subsided, but the memory of the hidden room and the shadowy figure remained. He had never told anyone about his discovery, fearing that they would think him crazy. But now, with Thomas, he felt a sense of trust and understanding. He knew that Thomas would listen without judgment, that he would help him unravel the mystery that had haunted him for so long. Thomas listened intently to Daniel's story, his mind racing with questions and possibilities. He was captivated by the tale of the hidden room and the mysterious Emily, his imagination ignited by the chilling descriptions of the shadowy figure. He realized that Daniel's story was more than just a childhood memory. It was a piece of the puzzle, a clue that could unlock the secrets of the Hemmings house and the strange occurrences that had plagued it for years. "Daniel," Thomas said, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and apprehension, "I think we need to investigate this hidden room. We need to find out what really happened to Emily." Daniel's eyes widened. "You believe me?" he asked, his voice filled with surprise. Thomas nodded. "I do," he said, "and I think there's more to this story than meets the eye. I think there's a dark secret hidden within the walls of that house." Daniel hesitated for a moment, his fear battling with his curiosity. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, his voice firm, "let's do it." The next morning, armed with flashlights and a sense of trepidation, Thomas and Daniel ventured into the Hemmings house. The air was thick with dust and the silence was deafening. They made their way to the attic, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The attic was a vast, cavernous space, its rafters draped with cobwebs and its floorboards creaking ominously. They searched carefully, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, until they found the hidden room. The door was locked, but Thomas, with a bit of effort, managed to force it open. The room was just as Daniel had described it, small and windowless, with a single chair and a table. The photographs and journal were gone, but the air was thick with a palpable sense of sadness and despair. Thomas and Daniel spent hours searching the room, hoping to find some clue, some piece of evidence that would shed light on Emily's fate. They found nothing. As they were about to give up, Thomas noticed a loose floorboard. He pried it open, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside the compartment, they found a single object, a small, silver locket. Thomas carefully lifted the locket from its hiding place, his fingers brushing against its cool, smooth surface. It was a delicate piece, intricately engraved with floral patterns. He held it up to the dim light filtering through the attic window, noticing a small clasp on its side. With a gentle click, the locket sprang open, revealing two miniature portraits inside. One was of a young woman with familiar striking blue eyes and a radiant smile, Emily. The other was of a man with a stern face and piercing gaze, his features etched with an air of authority. "Who is he?" Daniel whispered, peering over Thomas's shoulder. Thomas shook his head, his brow furrowed in thought. "I don't know," he said, "but he certainly looks familiar." They examined the locket closely, turning it over and over in their hands. There were no inscriptions, no markings that could identify the man or offer any clues about his relationship to Emily. "We need to show this to someone," Thomas said, his voice filled with determination. "Someone who might recognize him." They left the Hemmings house, the locket safely tucked away in Thomas's pocket. As they walked back to Thomas's house, a sense of urgency grew within them. They felt they were on the verge of uncovering a long-buried secret, a truth that had been hidden for decades. Thomas decided to seek the help of Mrs. Higgins, despite her previous hostility. He figured that as a longtime resident of Elm Street, she might hold valuable information about the Hemmings family and the mysterious man in the locket. He approached her house with a mix of apprehension and anticipation. Mrs. Higgins answered the door with a suspicious glare, her arms crossed defensively. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sharp and distrustful. "Mrs. Higgins," Thomas said, trying to maintain a calm and respectful tone. "We need your help. We found something in the Hemmings house, something that might shed light on the past." He showed her the locket, explaining where they had found it. Mrs. Higgins's eyes widened as she recognized the portraits. Her expression shifted from suspicion to shock, then to a deep sadness. "Where did you find this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Thomas recounted their exploration of the attic and the discovery of the hidden compartment. Mrs. Higgins listened intently, her gaze fixed on the locket. When he finished, she took a deep breath and invited them inside. They sat in her dimly lit living room, the silence punctuated by the ticking of an old grandfather clock. "That man," Mrs. Higgins finally said, her voice heavy with emotion, "is Judge William Caldwell. He was a prominent figure in this town many years ago." Thomas and Daniel exchanged surprised glances. The name Caldwell rang a bell, but they couldn't quite place it. "He was known for his strict adherence to the law," Mrs. Higgins continued, "and his unwavering belief in justice. He was also a close friend of the Hemmings family." She paused, her eyes filled with a distant memory. "Emily was a beautiful young woman," she said, "full of life and laughter. She and William were deeply in love, but their relationship was forbidden." Thomas and Daniel leaned forward, captivated by her story. "William was married," Mrs. Higgins explained, "to a woman who was cold and controlling. He was trapped in a loveless marriage, his heart yearning for Emily." She sighed, her voice filled with regret. Their affair was a secret, known only to a few. They would meet in the Hemmings house, away from the prying eyes of the town. Mrs. Higgins's revelation shed new light on the mystery. The hidden room, the locket, the journal entries, they were all pieces of a forbidden love story, a tragic tale of two souls bound by a secret passion. "But what happened to Emily?" Daniel asked, his voice filled with concern. Mrs. Higgins's face darkened. "Her illness," she said. "It was a devastating blow. William was desperate to save her, but there was nothing he could do." She paused, her eyes filled with sadness. "There were rumors," she whispered. "Whispers of foul play. Some people believed that William's wife, consumed by jealousy, had poisoned Emily." Thomas and Daniel were stunned. The story had taken a sinister turn, a tale of love and loss now intertwined with suspicion and murder. "But there was no evidence," Mrs. Higgins continued. "No proof to support the rumors. Emily's death was ruled a natural cause, and the whispers eventually faded away." She looked at them, her eyes filled with a plea. "This locket," she said, "it's a reminder of a love that was lost, a secret that has haunted this town for years. Please be careful. Some truths are best left buried." Thomas and Daniel left Mrs. Higgins's house, their minds reeling from her revelations. The story of Emily and William, their forbidden love and tragic fate, had touched them deeply. They felt a sense of responsibility, a need to uncover the truth and bring justice to Emily's memory. They decided to investigate further, delving into the town's archives and historical records. They spent hours poring over old newspapers, searching for any mention of Emily's death or any clues about William Caldwell's life. their efforts paid off. They found an article about Emily's funeral, listing the attendees and the cause of death. The cause of death was attributed to a rare and incurable disease, but something in the article caught Thomas's eye. The article mentioned that Emily had been treated by a local doctor, a man named Dr. Charles Evans. Thomas and Daniel tracked down Dr. Evans's descendants, hoping to find more information about Emily's illness. They learned that Dr. Evans had kept detailed records of his patients, and that his great-grandson, a history professor at the local college, had inherited those records. The professor, intrigued by their story, agreed to help. He searched through his great-grandfather's archives and found Emily's file. The file contained Dr. Evans's notes on Emily's condition, including the results of various tests and examinations. As they reviewed the notes, a chilling realization dawned on them. Emily's symptoms were not consistent with the rare disease listed as her cause of death. Instead, they pointed to a different possibility: poisoning. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough to convince Thomas and Daniel that Emily had been murdered. They believed that William Caldwell's wife, driven by jealousy and rage, had poisoned Emily, and that Dr. Evans, either through complicity or fear, had falsified the cause of death. Armed with this new information, they went to the police. They presented their findings: the locket, the journal entries, and Dr. Evans's notes. The police, initially skeptical, were intrigued by the evidence and agreed to reopen the investigation into Emily's death. The investigation was long and arduous, but it eventually led to the arrest of William Caldwell's wife. She confessed to the crime, admitting that she had poisoned Emily out of jealousy. She had used a rare and untraceable poison, ensuring that her crime would go undetected. The town was shocked by the revelation. The Caldwells had been a respected family, their reputation untarnished. But beneath the surface of respectability lay a dark secret, a tale of betrayal and murder. William Caldwell, consumed by guilt and grief, had withdrawn from public life after Emily's death. He had never remarried, his heart forever bound to the woman he had loved and lost. With the truth finally revealed, a sense of justice prevailed. Emily's memory was cleared, and her tragic story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the destructive power of jealousy and the enduring strength of love. Thomas and Daniel, their mission accomplished, felt a sense of closure. They had helped to right a wrong, to bring peace to a restless spirit. They had also forged a deep bond, their friendship cemented by their shared experience and their commitment to justice. As Thomas settled into his retirement, he often thought of Emily and William, their love story forever etched in the history of the old house on Elm Street. He tended to his roses, watched the sunset from his porch, and listened to the whispers of the wind, carrying the echoes of the past and the promise of a peaceful future.